Inflation is one of the most significant risks affecting retirees and pre-retirees, especially when savings exceed $20,000, while smaller balances may experience slow, almost imperceptible erosion. Larger amounts amplify the impact of even modest price increases. Inflation measures how the cost of goods and services rises over time, and it directly reduces the purchasing power of money. A dollar saved today will buy less tomorrow if prices increase, and when a person holds substantial savings, the absolute loss becomes increasingly meaningful. For example, $20,000 subjected to a 5% annual inflation rate loses approximately $1,000 in purchasing power in a single year. Over multiple years, this loss compounds, creating a situation where even disciplined savers may see a significant portion of their wealth eroded without spending any of it. Many retirees assume that keeping money in a standard savings account or a low-risk instrument is sufficient protection against financial risk. In reality, nominal balances may appear stable, but their real value declines steadily. If the inflation rate exceeds the interest earned on savings, the effective growth is negative, meaning the money is worth less in practical terms. This can impact the ability to cover essential expenses, particularly for retirees who depend on fixed income sources such as Social Security, pensions, or annuities. The effect is not only cumulative but also subtle. This perceived security can delay necessary actions such as diversifying assets or allocating funds to investments that generate real returns. Without proactive measures, the savings are slowly and silently losing value, which can significantly affect long-term retirement planning. The combination of inflation and larger balances also interacts with other economic factors. Interest rates play a critical role in determining how much retirees earn from their savings, and balances over $20,000 are particularly sensitive to their fluctuations. Many retirees rely on savings accounts, certificates of deposit, or money market funds for security, believing that these instruments provide safe, predictable returns. In practice, the nominal interest earned on these accounts is closely tied to central bank policies, which can change over time based on economic conditions. When interest rates are high, yields on savings appear reasonable, but when rates are low, the returns often fail to keep up with inflation. For someone holding more than $20,000 in cash or short-term instruments, this gap between interest earned and rising costs translates into a gradual, continuous loss of purchasing power. Even a few percentage points of difference between interest and inflation can represent hundreds of dollars annually on larger balances, compounding into thousands over several years. Interest rates are influenced by macroeconomic conditions, including inflation targets, economic growth, and government debt levels. Central banks adjust short-term rates to maintain price stability, stimulate growth, or manage financial crises. While these policies stabilize the economy, they directly affect the returns available on safe assets. Retirees with moderate savings may feel the impact only slightly, but for balances exceeding $20,000, the effect is significant. Money held in low-yield accounts loses real value faster than smaller balances, which magnifies the risk of relying solely on cash or near-cash instruments. Another factor is the structural relationship between interest rates and government debt. Large federal deficits require borrowing, and high debt levels put pressure on governments and central banks to maintain low interest rates. Low rates reduce borrowing costs, but also reduce the income retirees earn from safe investments. Money held in bank accounts, savings bonds, or other fixed-income instruments generates less return, leaving large balances increasingly exposed to inflation and currency risk. This dynamic is particularly relevant for older Americans who depend on interest income to supplement retirement resources, as it can significantly affect monthly spending capacity over time. The interaction of interest rates and inflation highlights why traditional savings strategies often fail for larger balances. Retirees may assume that keeping money in insured accounts is sufficient, but low rates paired with persistent inflation steadily reduce real value. For balances above $20,000, even minor discrepancies between interest earned and inflation accumulate, decreasing the effective wealth available to fund living expenses, healthcare, or emergency needs. Additionally, larger balances create behavioral risks related to interest rate cycles. People may chase slightly higher yields through alternative accounts or products, exposing themselves to fees, penalties, or riskier instruments that were not part of the original plan. The nominal stability of a savings account can be misleading. Money appears safe while its real purchasing power declines. Understanding the connection between interest rates, inflation, and real returns is essential to preserving wealth. Finally, interest rate limitations highlight the need for a broader approach that combines cash with other assets capable of producing returns above inflation. Without such diversification, retirees with significant savings face an ongoing, predictable erosion of purchasing power. By recognizing how interest rates interact with economic conditions, larger balances can be managed to maintain stability, avoid losses in real terms, and ensure that money continues to meet retirement needs over the long term. Government debt and currency devaluation have a direct impact on retirees and individuals, holding savings over $20,000, influencing the long-term stability of their money. High national debt levels create structural pressure on monetary policy, and the management of that debt can affect the purchasing power of domestic currency. In the United States, federal debt exceeds $34 trillion, and servicing this debt requires continuous borrowing and interest payments. Large balances of savings are disproportionately affected because the policies enacted to manage debt influence the real value of money over time. One common method governments use to manage debt without overtly raising taxes or cutting spending is to allow moderate inflation, which reduces the real burden of debt. While this may help public finances, it erodes the purchasing power of savings, especially for balances above $20,000, where the absolute loss becomes more significant. Currency devaluation occurs when the value of a nation's currency declines relative to other currencies or loses purchasing power domestically due to inflationary pressures. This is a gradual, often predictable process in economies with high debt levels, and it is not limited to extreme scenarios. The US dollar has experienced a long-term decline in purchasing power, losing over 95% since the Federal Reserve was created in 1913. While smaller balances may see less immediate impact in absolute terms, larger savings magnify the effect, meaning that hundreds or thousands of dollars can be eroded over time even without any withdrawals. The combination of government debt and currency devaluation affects retirees who depend on fixed income or savings accounts because the real value of these resources diminishes steadily, potentially reducing the ability to cover essential expenses such as healthcare, housing, and daily living costs. The interaction between debt and currency value also influences interest rate policies. Central banks often maintain low interest rates to reduce borrowing costs for governments and stimulate economic growth, but these low rates result in lower returns on safe savings vehicles. Larger balances held in cash or low-risk instruments earn less in nominal terms while simultaneously losing value in real terms, intensifying the erosion caused by currency devaluation. Retirees holding over $20,000 in savings are particularly affected because they have a greater amount of money exposed to these systemic pressures, making careful management and strategic allocation critical. Many retirees assume that money held in federally insured accounts or in US dollars is inherently secure, but high debt levels and gradual currency devaluation challenge this assumption. Even without market volatility, real wealth can decline due to structural economic factors. This is especially relevant for retirees with fixed income streams, as their ability to maintain lifestyle standards depends on purchasing power rather than nominal account balances. Understanding that government debt and currency policies influence the value of large balances is necessary for long-term planning. Mitigating these effects requires awareness and a structured approach. Diversifying assets, maintaining liquidity, and focusing on instruments that preserve or grow real value can reduce exposure to debt-related currency devaluation. Without such measures, balances over $20,000 are steadily exposed to predictable losses in purchasing power, even if the nominal value remains unchanged. Recognizing the interplay of debt, inflation, and currency devaluation allows retirees to plan more effectively, maintain stability, and protect their savings from structural economic pressures that disproportionately affect larger balances over time. Common financial advice often fails retirees and individuals holding savings above $20,000 because it does not fully account for the complexities of managing larger balances in a changing economic environment. Chasing higher yields or short-term returns is another common recommendation that can create unnecessary risk. Retirees may be advised to move money into higher interest accounts, bonds, or other financial instruments that promise slightly better returns. But these often carry hidden risks or fail to account for inflation and fees. When larger balances are involved, the absolute losses from misjudged interest rate environments or poorly timed investments are magnified, making what may seem like minor errors financially significant. Similarly, market speculation, stock picking, or chasing hot investment trends is frequently suggested in popular financial advice. But these strategies rely on timing and luck rather than structured, systematic planning. For individuals holding substantial savings, missteps can result in large, irreversible losses that jeopardize financial security in retirement. Another limitation of common advice is the tendency to offer one-size-fits-all solutions. General recommendations often do not differentiate between small savings accounts and balances exceeding $20,000, where management strategies must take into account liquidity, tax implications, and long-term preservation of wealth. Advice that ignores these considerations leaves larger balances exposed to erosion and reduces the ability to maintain purchasing power over time. Behavioral patterns further illustrate why common advice fails. Retirees may assume that following standard recommendations is sufficient to preserve wealth, leading to overconfidence in cash or conservative investments. Ultimately, traditional financial advice does not account for the combined effects of inflation, low interest rates, government debt, currency devaluation, and individual retirement needs. Without a framework designed to address these variables, savings above $20,000 are vulnerable to predictable declines in real value. To effectively protect larger balances, retirees need a structured system that integrates spending discipline, diversified productive assets, strategic liquidity, tax planning, and automated processes. This approach addresses the limitations of common advice and provides stability, preserving purchasing power and reducing the risks that typically undermine larger savings in retirement. Stability for retirees and individuals holding savings above $20,000 comes from structure and consistency rather than attempting to predict short-term market movements or chasing speculative opportunities. Large balances introduce complexities that require careful management, including inflation, interest rate fluctuations, government debt pressures, and currency devaluation. Without a clear framework, these factors can gradually erode purchasing power and reduce financial security over time. Structure provides a foundation to navigate these challenges systematically, ensuring that decisions are deliberate and not driven by momentary market noise or emotional reactions. By creating a consistent plan for income, spending, and investment allocation, retirees can maintain control over their resources and reduce exposure to unpredictable events. Consistency in financial management reduces the impact of human behavior on outcomes. Individuals frequently make decisions based on fear, greed, or short-term concerns, which can lead to reactive and harmful actions such as selling low during market downturns or over-concentrating on a single asset class. Automated systems, scheduled contributions, and predefined allocation rules remove these decisions from daily judgment, ensuring that money moves in accordance with a plan rather than impulses. Large balances particularly benefit from this approach because even minor deviations can result in substantial real-dollar losses over time. Predictable, repeatable processes ensure that money continues to work according to strategy, regardless of emotional state or external volatility. Maintaining a clear distinction between emergency funds, long-term investments, and liquid assets allows retirees to meet immediate needs without disrupting growth-oriented accounts. Diversification across asset classes and investment vehicles mitigates the impact of inflation, market cycles, and currency fluctuations, further enhancing stability. Regular contributions, periodic rebalancing, and adherence to predetermined allocation strategies maintain alignment with long-term goals. Over decades, these repeated actions compound, providing more reliable outcomes than sporadic interventions or reactive adjustments. Stability emerges not from predicting which investments will perform best in the short term, but from disciplined application of well-established principles, executed in the same way month after month. This approach preserves purchasing power, reduces the risk of catastrophic losses, and ensures that resources are available to cover retirement needs even in uncertain economic conditions. Structured financial management also enhances adaptability. Stability is not static. It is maintained through consistent practices, clear processes, and disciplined execution. The combination of structure and repetition ensures that retirees can manage larger savings confidently, reduce risk, and maintain financial independence without relying on speculation, emotional reactions, or unpredictable market trends. Spending is sustainable, and retirement goals remain achievable even in the face of economic uncertainty.